and welcome to another episode of First Chair Fantasy. I'm Lucy, and joining me in the second chair tonight is Alice White.
Hello.
Yes, and we are being all festive today. We are going to be discussing Terry Pratchett's Hogfather, but in a slight departure to the format that I've only established in one episode so far. I've read the book, but you have watched the TV adaptation. So, this is going to be quite exciting. Now, as your first challenge, you need to read the blurb on the back of one of these, because we have both the DVD and the book with us here.
I would
which
like
one
to
do you want to read?
the book, because
okay, here we go.
It may shed some light on something I didn't know. So, it's the night before Hogswatch, and it's too quiet. Where is the big jolly fat man? Why is death creeping down chimneys and trying to say ho ho ho? The darkest night of the year is getting a lot darker. Susan the Gothic governess has got to sort it out by morning, otherwise there won't be a morning, ever again. The 20th Discworld novel is a festive feast of darkness and death, but with jolly robins and tinsel too. As they say, you'd better watch out.
Well, there we go. And in contrast to Elantris last month, much easier to pronounce everything on the back of the book.
Nice short words.
Yeah.
Always good.
So, Ali, what did you think of the Hogfather?
Yeah, that's not an easy question to answer, unfortunately, which, well, it's good really, because we're going to have a discussion, but yeah, it's funny, without reading the book, I can tell that I liked the story, but I didn't like the way it was told. And I don't know how I like the story, because I haven't read the book, but there's just something about it I can tell I like, because I've never read a Terry Pratchett novel, I can tell I like his sense of humour. Yeah. Yeah, that really comes through. And I like the character of Death. I thought he had some really good one-liners. But yeah...
We should maybe say, for a bit of context here, that you are actually a professional film editor.
Yeah, well, I try to be.
and so you do have a unique insight onto how this adaptation wasn't great, in a way.
Yeah, it's funny, I very much was watching the editing and watching the cinematography and things like that, and although that doesn't get in the way of enjoying a film, it definitely now is something that I look out for and can kind of hamper a film if some of the edits are odd, and there are a lot of weird edits going on here.
Because I think, as we said, a lot of reviewers of the adaptation said it's a very accurate adaptation, and in a way it is. I mean, I personally don't like the adaptation anymore. I mean, I like it enough to own the DVD. But it is this odd thing of what's suitable for narrative style in a book isn't necessarily suitable narrative style for a film. If you're trying to put it in a 3-act structure, it just doesn't really work that way.
No.
And Pratchett doesn't tend to write in nice, easy 3-act structures anyway.
No, I get the sense he's not someone who conforms to...
Well, conforming, whatever.
Yeah, it's funny, I was looking through some IMDb reviews like just now, and so many of them are all 8, 9, 10 out of 10. A lot of them saying they're Terry Pratchett fans and it's a really faithful adaptation. So I'm kind of struggling because as I say, I know I like the story, but I don't like the way it was told. So maybe I don't like the story.
Well, maybe we should start with the story. What, according to the adaptation, is the story of the Hogfather?
Yes. Well, this is. I think there were some things that weren't particularly clear, but just from my understanding of it, the Hogfather has mysteriously vanished, and Death discovers this and thinks we can't let the belief in him die on Christmas Eve. Hogswatch Eve, sorry. Completely irrelevant to Christmas.
Yes. Just happens to star a big fat bloke in a red suit.
At the winter time, they give presents. We mustn't let the children's faith and belief in Hogfather die. So Death steps in and delivers the presents on his behalf. In the meantime, his granddaughter Susan is trying to figure out where the Hogfather has gone and realises that nasty Mr. Teatime.
I don't care how you pronounce it. It's either tea time or Teatime. Yeah, let's be tea time.
Yeah.
He doesn't deserve our respect.
No. Mr. Teatime, horrible Mr. Teatime, is trying to destroy children's belief in sort of fairy tale characters. Because the auditors have commissioned him to do so.
Yes, so what did you think of the auditors? What were they?
The auditors, I got the feeling they are sort of outside of time and space in a way. They're sort of gods, but not gods.
Yeah.
Not people that we should put our faith in. They're more just sort of the administrators of
That's it, yeah, and I seem to remember thinking when I watched the adaptation that they didn't explain the auditors very well. There also wasn't a really good representation of the auditors, because the auditors are meant to be absolutely identical. They always come in threes, and for some reason in the adaptation there were 4 of them.
Yes, four. That's weird.
So in the rules of the auditors are, they always come in threes, and they never die by never living. So they don't... How they ensure their own immortality is by never having a personality.
I think they do touch on that, don't they, in the adaptation?
But I felt in the adaptation each one had a different accent. They should have all been identical and had the same voice, but instead there was like a tall one and a short one.
Yeah, maybe they felt like they had to separate them for some reason. Maybe it would have been too weird if there were 3 identical people.
I don't know, maybe. I mean, even in the books themselves, they're kind of set out as being a bit strange by anything they say in the Hogfather doesn't have speech marks around it, because it's like... They don't speak, they just make it so they have spoken.
Okay, so people hear directly in their brains.
Yeah, they sort of just, they remember that speach happened.
Oh, okay.
Rather than them actually speaking, so they never have speech marks.
I can imagine that'd be quite hard to get across.
I can imagine, but it's just little things like that. I, as you can probably tell, I wasn't a fan of how the auditors were described. But yes, you're right. The auditors are the administration of the universe. They are the paperwork. They are the missing 90% of the universe that keeps an eye on the rest of it.
I like the concept a lot. You know, that the fact that there are people, if you can call them people, the beings who are sort of just keeping things ticking over. But I like that they weren't sort of, it wasn't clear whether they had good or bad motives. They just said this is what needs to happen. Yeah. And obviously from our point of view, killing the Hogfather is a nasty thing to do, but they seem very much just sort of matter of fact, you know, this is what has to happen. So I did like that about them. But yeah, it wasn't particularly clear.
Did you get from the adaptation why they wanted to kill the Hogfather?
No. Not at all, no. I mean, whether that's just my memory failing me or whether... But no, all I remember is they go to someone's office where tea time is there, and they just go... He needs to die.
The reason they're trying to kill the Hogfather, this probably could be what this episode is mostly, is me filling in holes.
Yes, probably.
But the reason they want to kill the Hogfather is that they want to rid the world of everything that's not logical. Okay. It's like, so human beings, particularly in the world of the Discworld, where you know, the narrative of stories is actually a physical force in the universe. Human beings are more or less made up of things that aren't logical. You know, they believe in all kinds of daft things like truth and justice and
and mercy
and stuff like that. So the auditor's plan is to stop people believing in the Hogfather and then gradually, I guess, move on to making them stop believing in everything else that doesn't work out. And by doing this, they hope to be able to make the universe accountable for everything, like just to be able to count everything. And they do actually return in the next Death story and have another crack at doing
Oh, really? Yeah, because one of the questions that then arises from knowing that is why now?
Yeah.
You know, I guess because it's convenient for the story, you know, to have it happen around Hogswatch. So.
Also, in the book, Hogswatch is the thinnest time of year. It's like, because of the nature of the Discworld, and it's very, very magical, it runs on magic and stories, Hogswatch is the time where bad things can happen, they can get in. So it's like, it's if it was going to happen anywhere, and if their first attack was going to be anywhere, it was going to be Hogswatch.
See, again, that's not really explained. I mean, I get that that's kind of on the periphery of the plot, you know, it's not that important to explain it, but the more I understand, the more questions I have, and that's one of them. So
the auditors want to get rid of Hogfather, and they hire Tea Time to do so. What happens next?
It all kind of happened very quickly. There's a very odd pacing in the adaptation where you go from one scene to another, and you're bouncing between these 3 or 4 settings a lot. And so my brain at this point kind of got into a bit of a scramble, but I remember he heads towards the Tooth Fairy's kingdom, which is above the Hidden University. But I don't quite remember. Oh, he seeks out these men in the pub, doesn't he? Yeah. I've forgotten their names now.
Well, there is Chicken Wire, Medium Dave, Banjo, and Mr. Sidney.
Yes.
Oh, and then Mr. Brown as well.
Yeah, so he finds them in the pub and recruits them. Is that right?
Well, I think it's meant to have met them in the pub. You know, he knows people, and Meaty and Dave, Chickenwire and Banjo particularly, are kind of old hands in the Ankh-Morpork criminal underworld. Banjo is just this kind of big, slightly dumb doofus.
I really liked Banjo.
Yeah, who believes in... He's a child in a very large grown man's body, and he just follows his brother Medium Dave around. The reason he's called Medium Dave, by the way, is because there's kind of like an Actors Guild thing in Thieves and Ankh-Morpork. They can't have the same name. So there was already a small Dave and a big Dave, so he had to be a Medium Dave. And Chickenwire is so called because his one genius contribution to the act of thievery and random murder was to wrap the bodies in chicken wire before throwing them in the river so the bits don't fall off.
That's very nice.
Yeah, well, you know,
that's yeah.
I think this is something I noticed about it. They tried to very much childify the adaptation. I mean, I don't know if you could have picked that up because you've not read the book, but
no. Well, it seemed like a really family friendly romp, you know. So
yeah, but I mean, the book is all about death and blood and the old ways of doing things, and the fact that all the old myths are sooner or later, as it says in the book, about blood.
They do start with that line, and they did give it sort of a dark tone at the beginning, but I kind of had forgotten all about that until the very end of the second half, and I was like, oh yeah, the blood thing. So the team gets together in the pub. Yes, and he goes after the Tooth Fairy. Yeah. Well, he's not after the Tooth Fairy per se, he's after the teeth, isn't he? Because if someone possesses some hair or teeth or clippings, then various body clippings, then they can... Is it just control you or control your beliefs? Or control the people, I think. It's like it's the Discworld version of kind of voodoo, I guess. Yeah. Which is fine. That makes sense. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I think my issue in the adaptation, maybe it's the same in the book, is that you see a lot of the unseen. It's the unseen university. Yeah. You see a lot of it intercut almost from the beginning, but it's not until about two-thirds through the first half that you really actually get the relevance of why we're seeing these men, and they reveal that if you have the teeth of someone, you can control them. So you see quite a lot of tea time trying to get the teeth, a lot of the university, before you actually understand the motives. And that, for me, would have made understanding the story a lot easier if they'd have revealed that earlier on. See, it's odd, because I remember the first time I read the book, I didn't get what Tea Time was trying to do until quite a long way in. I think Pratchett really did try to keep this one under wraps. Like, reading it, when you reread it, all the information is there. Yeah, but you don't necessarily know. Yeah, but you don't know what you're looking at the time. So I think he was quite clever there. But yeah, the first read through, it took me a long time to figure out what was going on and why all these people were doing the things they were doing and acting the way they were acting. But I can see that's fine for a book. You kind of expect that from a book, and actually I love the first time I read a fantasy novel and like random words have capitals for no apparent reason and people are just doing amazing things with no description of why or how, and then it's not until later that you slowly get the reveal of what's going on. I love that, but I'm not sure it works too well for a kids' film because they very much tried to kidify this adaptation, I think. Yeah, it's funny. With a book, I think you're in it for the long run with a book. You pick up a novel and you know it's going to be 10, 12 hours of your life and you're willing to commit that. But with a film, because, you know, already it's only 2 hours instead of 12, you have to compact it, you have to reorder it to an extent to make it work. And I felt like that was, if they'd have just changed that, I think it would have improved it a lot, just making it clearer from the start. And especially if it's aimed at a younger audience, I really don't think people, you know, 10, 12 years old would have got it, really. I mean, I don't know how well it actually did when it was out. I mean, this was 2006, this adaptation. It was straight to TV, wasn't it? It was, yeah. Sky One. I watched it at the time, and I have to say I enjoyed it, because some of the stuff in here is really good. Yeah. Like, I quite enjoyed Michelle Dochetty's sort of portrayal of Susan. I really enjoyed Susan, yeah. Although I think at some points she gets... I don't know if the actress got tired. Oh, really? There's just a few line deliveries where I'm like, why would Susan say that? And then I kind of realised it was
because they were trying to get across aspects that might have been like in internal monologue in the book. And you know, Susan's not the type to say X or Y. She's the ultimate stoic.
Yeah.
You know, it's like,
so if she were to act the way she does in the book, it may have been a bit stone-faced.
Yes, yeah. And I mean, we all know that I'm probably not pronouncing her name right now.
Dockery? Yep.
Anyway, the wonderful person she is.
Michelle.
We all know that she can act a damn good, haughty noblewoman.
Yes.
Because
Sit down to
Downton Abbey, which I guess must have started like 4 years or so, 3 or 4 years after this. So I don't know what she did in between times. But we know that she can pull off that act quite well, and I think maybe, because I guess it's not made clear in the adaptation that Susan actually is nobility.
I just thought she was an au pair for some children, and obviously it turns out she's the grandfather of Death. But,
Granddaughter of Death.
Sorry, granddaughter. What did I say?
Grandfather.
Not the grandfather of Death. Death is the grandfather of her.
Yeah.
I didn't get any sense that she was anyone special as a human, only in the sense that she's related to Death.
It is a sort of odd thing this is Susan's second book appearance. Her first book appearance was as a teenager when rock and roll music invaded the Discworld.
Cool.
Which I've also got an adaptation of. I have the animated adaptation of that.
That sounds awesome.
When she ends up following the rock star Bud E. Sellin around, which translates as Bud of the Holly.
Ah, very clever.
But of course most of her backstory is in that book, and it kind of goes all the way back to the earlier Death books of Mort, when he takes on an apprentice and he adopts a daughter, and they fall in love and they have a child, and that's Susan. But when they return to the world, Mort and Isabel, Death's daughter, become the Duke and Duchess of Stow-Helit, which is this city on in Discworld. And then they die before the events of Soul Music. So technically Susan is a duchess, and she's just sort of, you know, her father was good enough at setting up and running estates that they more or less run themselves. So a lot of her character arc throughout the 3 books that she appears in is her trying to find her own way in the world when she's not completely human.
Okay, because they do explain the fact that Death adopted her mother, but I don't think they ever mention that she's the Duchess. Whether they maybe changed the character, do you think?
Maybe. I mean, I guess it would have been quite a lot of backstory to fit in. When yes, clearly she's a governess.
In a way, it's kind of irrelevant, isn't it, to this specific story?
Yeah, I guess
if you
it
take
is,
it as a standalone.
But it was just the tiny little things that annoyed me, like her saying that she grew up in Death's house, which she didn't. It was because her parents were quite strict about that. So they didn't want her getting involved with her grandfather, which is kind of why she's so reluctant to let them back in at the start of the story. Like, she's very clear, like, I don't want the Raven back in my life. I don't want, Death of Rats, leave it alone.
It's weird then. Why change those tiny details when it doesn't really impact the story?
I guess to make it, just simplify it a bit, I suppose, not have to explain the backstory. But yeah, no, I mean, I liked that version of Susan.
Yes, and I loved her hair.
Yeah.
It was really cool.
yeah, and the weird kind of just moves on its own.
Yeah,
and
it was awesome. And then that bit streak of black.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
And then, where were we?
So, tea time's gone for the tea.
Yeah.
It wasn't revealed, as I said, early enough, I don't think, that his motives. But when he did finally get the teeth and he got Nigel Planer's character to cast a spell, quite sort of
Mr.
haphazardly,
Sidney, wasn't it?
Yeah, Mr. Sidney. There was never a sense of them having actually achieved control of the children. I know that belief was dying in Hogfather, but there was never a moment where you see children at home and they all of a sudden have lost their faith in the Hogfather.
Well, there's the moment where the 2 kids that Susan looks after come and they think the Hogfather's come down the chimney, and it turns out it's their dad in a red cape.
Yes.
That's kind of the closest thing you get to it.
It is, but I felt that was more just related to them seeing their dad rather than the fact their teeth might have been under control.
It's an odd one, because in the book you get the sense that things aren't necessarily happening in the same order that you're seeing them.
Oh, okay.
Because faith in the Hogfather starts to die before you see Tea Time go to the Tooth Fairy's realm in the book.
Okay.
But at the same time, you know, it's this odd thing of Discworld of time isn't necessarily important in it, because most of the book takes place in frozen time. Because Susan stops time, and she doesn't start it again until way later in the book.
Oh, really?
So she does a huge chunk of the book in, like, no time, you know, because that's one of her powers. She can walk, she can live outside of time.
She does stop time briefly.
And I know in the adaptation, everything kind of continues on, and the world is still ticking around her. So it's like, it's this weird thing of, they show, like, the two children she's looking after, Gwaine and Twyla, like, finding out that the Hogfather's not real, and it's all very sad and everything. In the book, there's no time for that to happen in. It's like she doesn't come back until she's ready to let time go forward. And yeah, so it's an interesting idea. Like it's odd what they changed, I think. I don't remember there ever being a big moment in the book where it's like, the magic is working, look at the amazing magic circle.
No, it was never made clear.
Yeah, because they keep saying things like, it's magic so old it's not even really magic anymore.
I mean, but whether it's because I'm too sort of spoiled by Hollywood and big budgets, but you kind of expect to see some sort of shot of all these children, you know, different shots around the world of children in their bedrooms somehow shedding a tear because they're doing Hogfather or something, and some big impact, but there was never a sense of the spell was working, and the focus more was on opening the door, really, than controlling the children.
Yeah, the opening the door thing.
Yeah, I felt like it was a bit of a MacGuffin put in there to sort of distract the audience for some reason.
It's not made quite as... I mean, it is a thing in the book that it's like, we have to open the door, but it's made very clear in the book, I feel, that Tea Time only wants to open the door because he can't abide a locked door. It's like,
which is a fair enough motive. You know, if you see a big door with big locks on it, you think, oh, what's behind there? So it's understandable that he'd want to get it open, but it kind of became the focus of being there rather than the teeth, and that kind of confused me, especially because what they found, you know, once Death is there. No, it was Susan, wasn't it?
Yeah, because Death can't go to the Tooth Fairy's country, because it only contains things that children believe in.
Yeah. So once Susan's there, it's not even what you expect it to be, and the whole thing felt a bit pointless.
It's a little better done in the book, I would say.
Is it given less importance in the, like, less
it's,
time?
I mean, yeah, it's just kind of something that's happening in the background. Like, occasionally they'll just make mention of Mr. Brown can't open X door, and they do have a moment where you know, Mr. Brown just gives up, and then Tea Time chucks him down the stairs. And
poor Mr. Brown.
Yeah, poor Mr. Brown. I don't think he was a very nice man, it's fine. And then, of course, they have the moment where Sydney figures out how to open the door and finishes it all off. And then, of course, you know, there is the bit of Susan goes in and finds out what's on the other side. But it is kind of... It's not so much the climax of everything as it appears to be in the adaptation.
No.
But I guess they had to find a big exciting moment in that part of the story.
Yeah.
Maybe a side effect of having to split the story into two parts. I don't know.
Perhaps, yeah. There was sort of a beginning, middle, and end of each half, which kind of made it a bit weird. If you were to watch it back to back, I don't think it would feel like a typical 3-act structure. But like you say, Terry Pratchett doesn't really do 3-act structures anyway. But yeah, I really liked Tea Time.
Yes.
Like, I mean, I hated him, obviously, he was horrible. Yeah. But I liked hating him. He was a good character to hate.
Mark Warren, very good actor for that.
I mean, is his voice described like that?
Yeah, but actually I have to say, it is. It's a brilliant version of Tea Time. Yeah. But it's not what I had in my head.
Oh, really?
Oddly. Because he's kind of described as looking like a baby doll, almost. As like having, you know, perfect smile and perfect teeth, but also having one glass eye and the other eye is like a pinhole pupil.
That's cool.
And then he doesn't see the world like other people, as he says repeatedly. And but yeah, I thought it was a really good version of Tea Time, and he's suitably horrible, but at the same time smiles the whole time.
Yeah, that makes him more terrifying because you really can't read him what he's going to do next, and the fact that he's always saying like, "We're friends," you know, "I'm your friend," and it was quite creepy.
I just love the line that I think they I think they put this line wholesale into the adaptation. It's like, I don't have many friends. I don't have the knack. But I don't have any enemies at all. Isn't that nice?
You kill them all. Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah.
It was very sinister. So yeah, after they get the teeth, Susan comes in, sees the bogeyman. I'm never sure it's boogeyman or
No, bogeyman, I think.
Yeah,
and this is the grand twist of it all, isn't it? The Tooth Fairy.
Yes.
Because it's a franchise operation, but the original Tooth Fairy... the original Tooth Fairy was actually a bogeyman who got fed up of scaring the kids.
Yeah, which I like.
Yeah.
I like that.
And decided to try and protect them instead, so
Yeah.
he collected all their teeth together so nobody could control them.
Didn't collect their hair and their toes.
No, only their teeth.
But no, I liked that. That was
Yeah.
a good twist. I thought it was very sad that he died. She
Yeah,
died.
it died.
Yeah.
It was very old, I guess.
It was.
Yeah.
Also, I got very confused at this point because Susan had her friend with her. Is it
Bilious.
Bilious.
Bilious, the old god of hangovers.
Yes. Who she found at the
Castle of
Bones, where the Hogfather was expected to have been but wasn't. Now Bilious sort of just seemed to be along for the ride. He didn't seem to contribute much.
that is kind of Bilious's character. He only exists because one of the wizards mentioned that if you have a god of wine, why don't you have a god of hangovers? Because this is why the wizards are in the story, is because they're kind of, magical presence, as it were, on the thinnest night of the year, when there's a hell of a lot of excess kind of belief sloshing about, means that anything they say comes into existence. So it starts with the Veruca gnome.
Yes.
And then we move on to the Eater of Socks. So I think the Eater of Socks is in there.
Yeah, he's like some
But
weird...
there is also the Eater of
Roman.
Pencils
really?
in the book. And then they end up with the Cheerful Fairy, which I don't know. I don't think she's in the adaptation.
She's not in it.
They end up accidentally creating the Cheerful Fairy, who looks like everybody's least favourite primary school teacher, basically the one who was always clapping and had a whistle.
Way too happy,
just wanted to jolly everything along, and why can't everyone just be happy and we'll all have a jolly good time? And she basically makes the wizards miserable for a good chunk of the book.
I'm kind of glad that wasn't in there.
But yes, and we also have Bilious, the old god of hangovers.
Yeah, I mean, his existence makes sense.
Yeah.
But his importance to the story, in a story that is structured in such a way in the adaptation where it's flitting from one thing to another and there's so much to take in, it just seemed like another thing that was sort of just confusing things. And I understand that he's in the book and it wanted to be a faithful adaptation, but at the same time I felt he was given a lot of screen time but didn't do anything.
I think in the book, I mean, he's funny. He's a good character in the book, and he has a little character arc of his own, which I can't remember if actually any of that is apparent in the adaptation.
Well, he sort of strikes up a relationship with the Tooth Fairy, one of the Tooth Fairies, and they end up living in the... or he helps or something.
Kind of. He has some very funny moments in the book, like when he gets cured of hangovers, and that means that the god of wine gets the hangover cure reaction.
Okay.
It's like he gets the hangovers from the god of wine's drinking, so when he drinks a hangover cure, the god of wine gets the reaction. And it's just this great fun moment where he's watching this through a crystal ball and just screaming at it, because it's like, how do you like it?
And a taste of your own medicine.
But for the most part in the book, I think he's just there so Susan can explain things to someone.
Right, okay, so he's almost like the point of view of the reader, in
because
a way.
he's only, Susan finds him when he's a couple of minutes old. He's only existed for a few minutes, and she pulls him out of a castle vice that's collapsing around him. He knows nothing.
Mm-hmm.
He literally knows nothing. He says things like, I know that trees have brown bits at the bottom and green bits on top. But he doesn't really kind of have any specific knowledge about the world. He's literally there so Susan can be all stoic and have someone to look after and someone to explain things to.
That's fair enough. I mean, in the book it probably serves a really good purpose.
And he is funny in the book. He's good comic relief. When Susan doesn't really do comic relief, she's...
No.
Comedy is something that happens around her rather than to her.
Yeah. But I like that about her. I like that she was sort of no nonsense and got straight to the point. She was cool. But yeah, she pushes tea time
off the balcony.
Off the balcony, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Doesn't she? And this was another thing that wasn't completely made clear because he falls through into the unseen university.
It's the thing is, and I guess it wasn't entirely made clear in the adaptation because you see it a lot at the start. But because the Tooth Fairy's world only contains things that children believe in, it doesn't. Children don't understand death. They just understand that you go somewhere else, that you're not here anymore. So when people die in the Tooth Fairy's world, they just go somewhere else.
Okay. Because of course there are lots of Tooth Fairy minions killed.
And they were all landing on the Unseen University. And of course it's because the Unseen University is a massive magical sort of nexus, and so it's a thin place, so if something's going to happen, it's going to happen in the Unseen University. But yeah, so Tea Time kind of falls, but he just kind of lands in the Unseen University, but he's not technically dead.
You can't die from the Tooth Fairy's kingdom. Yeah, it was... I mean, I just assumed it was because the Tooth Fairy's kingdom was above the Unseen University, so you fall down and you end up below it.
It's just kind of elsewhere, I think.
Yeah.
I quite liked the visualisation of the outside of the Tooth Fairy's castle when it looks like a kid's painting.
Yes.
Where literally, like, it's a big blue sky and a big green grass and all the trees have big red apples in them. And it was like, it was one of those moments in the book when I read it, the description of the picture that every child draws. It was one of those moments where I was like, I thought I was the only one who thought that. I love when you find that moment in a book. And the difference is that in the book, it makes a very big point of the gap between the sky and the earth. Like whenever kids draw, they draw a blue line at the top for the sky and a green line at the bottom for the ground, and there's a big white gap in the middle, and that gap exists in the Tooth Fairy world, and it's like it's amazing because every character just keeps going, just don't look at the sky, just don't look at the sky. Why is the sun underneath the sky? But I think in order to make the adaptation, they made it a little bit more realistic, and the sky and ground actually meet, and it kind of looks a little bit more sensible. But I do quite like the look of the painted world, and
it was very cool actually. It was well done. It although it was 9 years ago, the adaptation, it hasn't dated in terms of effects and things. It wasn't entirely when she just looks at the painting and then goes into the painting, I just was like, what?
Yes. It's again, it's internal monologue. I think that's something any adaptation is always going to lose. You lose what the characters are thinking unless you're going to go for something very cheesy like voiceovers and stuff.
But the voiceover they had was really good because I mean it was the same actor that played Death, but it was the voiceover of Death.
I think so. Yeah.
I
thought
thought
they
that
put an
worked
effect
nicely.
on it for Death.
Yeah, I thought that worked really well. It did play out a bit more like a stage play. It really made me think of a stage play. You could imagine the narrator was to one side on the left, and then I imagine the auditors were sort of on stage right, and then at the end of every chapter they'd have a little sort of joke or something to say.
I now really want to see a Hogfather stage play.
That would be great. It'd be a hell of a job. It did feel more like a stage play in that sense.
So get to the end of there's plenty in the middle that we've not spoken about yet.
There is plenty,
But just the last point of Susan saving the Hogfather at the end. So you think it's all happy-do-lally and everything's wonderful and everyone goes back home, and then it turns out that it's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
So Death all of a sudden seems to know where the Hogfather is, and it's only since talking to you that I've seemed to sort of have a vague understanding of how that is, and it's because he knows where everyone is.
Yes.
And it's only because the Hogfather, there's a tiny bit of faith left in him.
Yeah.
He's managed to come back in sort of proto-Hogfather form.
And proto-Hogfather form is a giant hairy pig.
Yes, of course. So there's not a moment in the adaptation where Death goes, I finally know where he is. He just shows up and goes to Susan, look, you're coming with me, we're going to go get the Hogfather. And so I thought, well, why didn't you do that at the start? Well, it was never made clear that he didn't know, and now he does know. But anyway, they fly off on his magic horse.
Binky.
Yeah. And they find the Hogfather running away from the wolves in the forest. And Death says to Susan it's something that only humans, it's a human matter.
Yeah.
So Death can't get involved. So Human jumps down onto his back. I'm not sure how this is helping him.
Yeah.
If anything, it's just adding extra weight and he's going to run slower from the wolves. But anyway, she's helping him and they clear like a jump, don't they, over to a canyon. And the wolves turn out to be the auditors who are chasing him because this is it, this is the moment they can finally kill him. And she manages to fend off one of the wolves and hits it down into the canyon and kill... Well, can you kill an auditor?
Well, that's kind of the whole point of this final sequence, isn't it? It's like the auditors, because they were losing, because the teeth were rescued and tea time is dealt with, they took the risk to kind of take on living forms, like they broke their own rules,
which means they can die
because they believe that in order if you live you have to die. But normally it happens instantly. As the moment one of them uses the word "I," they just explode.
I really that's a tough thing to maintain. So I guess she kills one of them then by batting him down into the canyon, and at which point Death rocks up because now they're living, he can kill them, and they all die, and she's saved the Hogfather, but in the process there's blood on the snow. I mean,
that's the weird thing, isn't it? He dies in big inverted commas.
Yeah.
But that was the point all along in a strange way, because it's the blood on the snow that brings the sun back.
Yeah. And this is another thing that confused me. So much confusion. Because Death then explains that the sun was always going to rise.
Yeah.
But in a metaphorical way, the sun wouldn't have risen. So I'm thinking that it was more like humanity would have been a bit less human. Like, we would have lost some faith, and although the sun would have risen, we wouldn't really have felt its warmth. Like, the world would have been a darker place.
I think that's a pretty good way of putting it. I think Death's exact words are something like, the sun wouldn't have risen, a mere ball of gas would have illuminated the world.
Yeah. At which point I was like, what? I think that's the same thing. I mean, I don't know whether I'm just really bad at tapping into, like, Terry Pratchett's mind of the way he thinks and the way he portrays things, or whether it's not, whether the adaptation is not doing a good enough job. I think it's probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
I mean, you shouldn't always assume the audience of your film has to have prior knowledge. I always think a film should be self-contained.
I would say that this adaptation doesn't assume that at all. I think the reason they started with the Hogfather, because there's now been 3 of these kind of style adaptations of Terry Pratchett novels. I think the reason they started with the Hogfather is it's such an obvious allegory to Father Christmas and and the solstice and old pagan solstice beliefs, that it doesn't need that much explanation.
No, true. But I do feel like the little explanation it did need, it wasn't made clear. And you do have to make it crystal clear to sort of base the whole understanding of the story on. So, I mean, it wasn't even made clear that at the end that the Hogfather was dead. I mean, there was blood on the snow and Susan cried, but he could have just broken his nose.
Yeah.
He could have woken up and gone, oh, I'm all right.
That was something I thought was odd about this. They seem to have, for a film that stars Death and the granddaughter of Death, it avoided the word death an awful lot.
Yeah.
Like, there was a moment earlier in the adaptation where Death is trying to explain to Susan what's happening, whilst not explaining to her what's happening, because he's like that. And he says that Hogfather is gone. That's like the best word he can come up with. In the book it says dead.
See, this is right at the start, and that started off the confusion, because I thought the Hogfather had run away. I thought he was trying not to be found. I didn't realise that he was fading away due to lack of belief. I mean, they did say that belief was fading, but they didn't ever connect the two. So again, whether that's just because I'm not tapped into the Pratchett way of thinking.
Well, no, it's interesting because, as you say, they shouldn't have assumed that. I guess you can make maybe certain assumptions that the majority of your audience are going to be Pratchett fans if you make a Pratchett adaptation. But at the same time, you shouldn't create a 20-book jump-on point. Like, you shouldn't have had to have read 20 novels to be able to enjoy a film adaptation.
No, definitely not. It's a shame, because I really wanted to like it, and in a way I did like it. I enjoyed it. I never at any point thought, oh, what's the time, and
Yeah.
or I want to turn it off. I enjoyed the ride, but it was hard to take anything away from it.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to take something away from it. I wanted to have understood more about the Pratchett world, the Discworld, and the characters. And in the end, I had to come and find you and say, please explain.
Well, why don't we move on to that? Because you actually have your list of questions here.
I do, and I mean, we did speak about it briefly after I watched it. We tried to keep most of it for this.
Yeah.
So some of my questions have kind of been answered by our discussion, but I think it's still important that the questions came up while I was watching it. So, these were things I was thinking as I was watching it. I really like the opening that when the narrator says things just happen, what the hell?
Yeah.
That was a really good start because, some films try and go, oh, fate and things are so meaningful, and I like that this is just,
Well, the Discworld version of fate is an arse. He's a horrible person who just plays games with people and has no respect.
So I mean, I guess the auditors are external to fate and everything. They don't require belief to sustain them like the gods of the Discworld do. They just are there. They just exist and
they
always
are
will.
part of the world. The same way that like death is an anthropomorphized sort of incarnation of death, but death itself would continue to exist without him.
Yes.
Except for that one time it didn't, but yeah, we can get to that some other time.
Another story. Yeah, I guess death is just the way that humans sort of embody him in a way.
The auditors don't need that necessarily. That's why they're so plain and boring.
But now, I mean, this is going off of Hogfather now, but now that the auditors are dead, what impact does that have?
Only those 4 auditors are dead.
Oh, there's more.
There's an infinite number of them.
Oh, that's all right then. So, yes, I've written dollars ?
Dollars ?
Yes, because they said that their currency was dollars.
Ankh-Morpork uses dollars.
Right.
Don't know why.
What's the exchange rate with with British pounds? Yeah.
$1. It's given a lot of impression is given when you have Ankh-Morpork based books that $1 is actually quite a lot of money.
Oh really?
Like there's one called Night Watch, which is a great book, and I hope there will be a decent adaptation of that sometime. They were talking about doing a kind of police procedural thing based on Night Watch, so it would be Terry Pratchett CSI, basically.
Wow, that'd be amazing.
That would be incredible. But in Night Watch, there's a moment where you can buy a week's worth of meals for $1.
Oh, okay.
Like, so it's,
is it almost like Victorian times?
It is. It's very, very Victoriana. Very. I guess it's not quite steampunk because there's not much steam. But later Ankh-Morpork books are very much. I think someone described it as string punk.
I like that.
Like everything appears to be run off levers and string.
That's cool. I like that. So yeah, just the word dollar was not a word I was expecting to hear in this film.
I guess it's. I mean, it's a very universal currency. Everyone's going to understand what that means.
Yeah, that's true. So I wrote here, Tea Time and Co. trying to get the Hogfather, but Death finds he is gone. So that's a question that I wrote. So I think this was in the first half, and I was confused because Tea Time is essentially hunting someone who's disappeared. So I was thinking, has Tea Time already got him? Or has the Hogfather run away? Does Death know where he is? If Death does know where he is, why isn't he telling anyone?
I think this is part of the whole thing of I'm not sure that in the book things are happening in the chronological order that we're reading them.
Okay.
Also, there is precedent in the Discworld for events of significant magnitude having ripples backwards in time.
Oh, wow, okay.
This is a world where there are pre-annual wines, where you get drunk on the wine of a grape that will be planted next year, and you get the hangover before you get the...
Wow, okay.
So this is one of those weird things of a regular Discworld reader would have no trouble with the idea that the events start happening before the course.
It's this weird thing of sort of, because I've never read a Terry Pratchett. I've seen the play of Going Postal, but I feel like that was very that didn't include a lot of mythology.
But Going Postal
outside
is very mundane by the standards of... Actually, it's a brilliant book and a brilliant adaptation as well.
I loved the play.
Yeah.
I mean, I had no prior knowledge and I loved it, but I felt like that was very self-contained, whereas this alluded to so many other greater, worldly things that, I mean, they could never touch on all of it. So, but yes, I do understand that now. So another one was... Death can grant life, why didn't he save the Hogfather? Now, at one point he finds a girl, doesn't he?
He finds the matchstick girl of the old Victorian story, basically.
And her time's about to run out, isn't it? And as a present, as a gift to her from the Hogfather, which he's acting as, he fills up her life sand timer. And so I thought, well, just give the Hogfather some more life then. What's the problem?
I think it's that the Hogfather being a anthropological personification, his life is belief. I'm not sure that Death is really the character who can throw belief around.
Yeah,
he doesn't really have the glands for it, as they say repeatedly in the death episodes. Things like hope and love and fear and anger take glands, and he's not really big on glands.
Well, he hasn't even got any skin or muscles. But also, I understand now that he was acting as the Hogfather. Death can't give life, but the Hogfather could give presents, and that was his present as the Hogfather. But of course, at the end, when they find the Hogfather and defeat the auditors, he's no longer the Hogfather at that point. He is just Death, so he can't give life. So at the time I thought, come on, Death, stop, stop being stingy. But now I understand that that's not a power that he possesses.
No. It's something he does do very rarely. There is one other person that we know he has saved from dying, and that person was Susan's father.
Oh, right.
So it's the only other person who was living on borrowed time, as it were.
And how did he do that?
He just turned the lifetimer over.
So he can interfere.
He can interfere to a certain extent,
But as you say,
there are rules.
This isn't straightforward life.
Yeah.
This is faith. And bigger powers than that. So those are my main questions. They're quite big questions. Like, what's going on? But I do feel like I now have a much more solid understanding of it. But it's just a shame that I had to come to you to get that understanding. I would have liked to have got it from the adaptation on its own.
Well, yes, I think that's always a risk of an adaptation. I personally feel that it's the sign of a good adaptation if they can tell an entire story, even if they have to cut out some of the content. Because I've seen some awful book adaptations in my time. It's like the one that springs to mind was the adaptation of The Other Berlin Girl that I saw.
Right.
And I got to the end of the film, and my sister had read the book, and as we left the cinema, I was just asking questions like, what happened to this character? What happened to this character? What happened to this character?
Oh, really?
How did she marry again when she was married before?
Yeah, that's
and it was just
good.
all little details that were in the book, but they just cut out of the film entirely. And it's like, that's a bad adaptation.
It's funny. It's a weird balance to strike. You've almost got two separate jobs, and one of them is adapting the book. The other is making a good film. And I don't always feel like faithfully adapting a book guarantees, especially if it's a good book, guarantees a good film. They are very different art forms with very different pacing, and I feel like, I mean, judging by the IMDb reviews, most people think it's a really good adaptation, but that doesn't immediately mean that it's a good film. And so coming from someone who hasn't read the book, I wouldn't say it's a really good film because I didn't get the story. But it's odd. I mean, you've read the book and you don't particularly like it.
No, I think I find there are little moments in it that kind of break you out of the story. It's like they almost lost me right at the start when the narrator says that they're celebrating a festival in Ankh-Morpork, which is rather similar to your Christmas. And I was just like, no.
You don't know that we exist.
Who are you and why are you talking to us? That's not how this works.
The fourth wall was shattered.
The fourth wall broken, blown apart. No. And then there are just tiny little moments in it. Like, as I said earlier, I don't like the adaptation of The Auditors because it's not hard. Like, it would have actually been less effort to make the auditors how they are in the book.
Saved a lot of money on casting.
3 identical shapes with the same voice. That would have been so much less effort. But yeah, they put more effort into making a wrong adaptation of the auditors.
It's weird.
I also, oddly, would have quite liked it if they had completely cut off the final sequence with Susan on, riding the pig, saving the Hogfather. Because I don't think it was necessary. Like, even it's in the book, it's something that Pratchett does. You think the end has come and then there's always another bit. That's just how the books work, so you're used to it. In a film, it did just feel like there was a coda stuck on the end for no real
So you would have
reason.
rather that she just arrives back home.
And I mean, it would have been great if it had ended at the moment where Susan kills Tia Timey.
Okay.
Sorry, spoilers, Susan kills Tia Timey. I thought that would have been a great ending, because it's an awesome moment in the book. Where
I quite like that moment in the film as well.
She invites Death in for tea, lets time start again in the book at least. And then it's 4:30 in the morning, so the kids are up and playing with something noisy in there from their Hog's Watch stockings.
Yeah.
And then tea time comes in, and he's kind of tries to hold Susan at knife point with Death's sword. And then, so he invites the kids in. He's like, oh, there are children, let's have them in. And the kids believe, and this is kind of an earlier sort of throwaway plot point, the kids believe that the kitchen poker kills monsters.
Yes.
Because Susan, being the kind of person who can really see the monsters, opposed to other people who can't normally, has basically managed to get them to think that put all of their belief in the poker, and because belief is a real physical thing in this world, she now just beats up all the monsters that come into the house with the poker. So Tea Time threatens Death with the sword, and Susan throws the poker through Death and into Tea Time, and it only kills Tea Time because kids know exactly what a monster is when they see it. And I just thought that's a brilliant moment, and it would have been a great ending, a nice moment between Death and Susan, and then the kid, he goes back off on Binky and she gets on with her life. And I know that's not the ending of the book, and so I'm sure a lot of people would have been very annoyed, but I felt that for an adaptation, that's a good ending.
Yeah,
it's an ending that doesn't ask a lot of questions, because putting that final sequence in means that Death has to give like an exposition dump at the end to explain what the hell was going on. An exposition dump is fine in a book, but in an adaptation you're just like, it's a little like that last quarter of Lord of the Rings.
An ending, another ending. And that moment was really cool when the poker goes through Death and Susan goes, how did you know? And, Death goes, well, I just, knew that it would work out. And it's a really good moment because you hate Tea Time and you're like, yes, die Tea Time. Yeah. Like you say, it kind of speaks for itself. There's no questions. It just is what it is.
Yeah.
So, I agree. It would have been a really good closing point. Yeah. Whether they could have somehow slightly switched the order, maybe to save the Hogfather and then they kill Tea Time. I don't know.
Maybe. I think it's just like you saying, an adaptation is a tricky thing.
Yeah.
And it is quite a faithful adaptation. I'm just not sure that Terry Pratchett's style of writing really suited a direct translation into film. But no, it's a shame. I can see why they started with this one. They also have done The Colour of Magic, which is the first Pratchett Discworld novel, and is sort of, it's one of those weird situations of if anyone who hasn't read Pratchett says, where should I start? Most people will say, don't start with The Colour of Magic.
Oh, really?
It's the first book, but don't start with The Colour of Magic.
Okay.
He wasn't quite in his stride. It's this weird thing where Discworld started as a parody of 1980s genre fiction.
Really?
Not sort of 1980s fantasy fiction. And so basically that first story isn't really a self-contained story. It's a series of little vignettes. It's Rincewind and Twoflower, who are some of the best characters ever, but Rincewind and Twoflower kind of stumbling from one disaster to another for no real great purpose. And then there's this they're like Fantastic. It's kind of a second half of the same story. It was the next novel. And they suddenly kind of throw in this great world-ending catastrophe type thing to kind of explain everything away. Well, not to explain everything away, but just suddenly they drop a climax into everything, and they have to have a whole other book to go fix it. And I think it's like, I can see why they wanted to do it again as an adaptation, but it did not work particularly well. They had poor David Jason as Rincewind, because David Jason is obviously in The Hogfather as Albert, Death's manservant.
It was surprising, actually, he was such a side character, because being such a big name in British TV, I mean, he was on screen a fair amount, but I thought he'd be one of the main...
Yeah, well, the thing is, David Jason is a massive Pratchett fan, and he just wanted to be in the film. So they got him the part of... He played Albert. Actually, I think he did a reasonably good job as Albert tonight. That's a pretty good adaptation of Albert.
Death and Albert.
Yeah.
Their scenes are great. I like them.
But in Colour of Magic, he's playing Rincewind. And Colour of Magic was quite a few years later. And, you know, David Jason is not the youngest man in the world, even in, like, 2009. And basically it's like, Rincewind spends a lot of that story running.
Oh, really?
And he just kind of couldn't do it.
Oh no.
And it's a real shame, because it's like, if they'd made the adaptation back in the 80s somewhere, he would have been perfect for it.
That's a shame. But how does that work with having two characters in the Discworld universe played by the same actor?
Yes, just don't ask questions. Because I think Tony Robinson might be in Colour of Magic as well, actually, I can't remember. But then the third adaptation that they've done is Going Postal. And Going Postal is a much more generic story. I've said this. I said this in Elantris. I use the word generic far too much. Generic does not mean bad.
No, it just means sort of conventional.
Conventional. I mean, Going Postal is it's kind of the end of a series of books that have been gradually growing the technology of the world, and kind of the world has moved on from the era of Rincewind. And just the technologies that they have access to is very different now.
They're like radio pylons and things.
They're called they're semaphore towers. They use semaphore. Like I said, it's string punk. Everything is lights and string and levers. But Going Postal is a story of a con artist who gets roped into running Ankh-Morpork's royal post office. A job which has killed the last 3 incumbents in mysterious circumstances. And so it's a much more conventional story style, and the acting in it is incredible, and they throw their heart and soul into it, and it's a real kind of slightly not quite steampunk Victorian world, so it doesn't need any explanation. The storytelling is in every frame of that, and we'll have to show it to you at some point.
I really want to see it.
You know, everything, like they put so much love into just like the posters in the background and stuff that tell you so much about the story and the world around it. And I think in Going Postal, they got it right. And it was the right story to do, because Moist von Lipwig, who is the main character of the
amazing name.
of Going Postal, is just a fantastic character, and was played really well by an actor who I currently can't remember the name of.
It's alright, you can add it in later.
Yeah. I'll just be in silence, like... Moist von Lipwig was played by Richard Coyle.
Yeah.
But yeah, and it was awesome, and a much better Discworld adaptation. Still felt like the Discworld, but was a good, solid story, and that's the one that I will watch just because I want something to watch.
So is the conclusion that he is unadaptable in the film?
Oh, he resisted it for a very long time. I mean, I have 2 of the animated adaptations on DVD. I've got Soul Music and Weird Sisters. And Soul Music is a good adaptation. It's not bad, but it's so long. And Soul Music is a shorter book than this, in Hogfather.
So it doesn't need to be that long.
But it's absolutely word for word faithful.
Wow.
The animation style is not incredible. There's a little bit of the rubber arms going on with all the characters.
Hey, it's all the rage in the Adventure Time.
But yeah, it is a long undertaking watching one of those adaptations. Weird Sisters, I think, is slightly shorter, but has some great voice acting in that as well, because it's the 3 witches.
Is the Weird Sisters in Harry Potter, the band, a reference to Pratchett?
I have no idea, maybe.
They play at the ball.
Weird Sisters is a reference to Shakespeare.
Okay. Oh, the 3
the 3 witches. So, and
Macbeth.
The story of Weird Sisters is basically a Shakespearean play. It's a massive rip-off of like Macbeth, and a bit of Hamlet thrown in there and stuff. And
why not?
I think that's why that was one of the first ones to be adapted into a stage play, and from what I understand, a very successful stage play. I've never actually seen it, but I'd love to one day. It's not often put on, those guys.
I think plays can run a bit longer than films as well, especially TV films that appeal to all ages. you can't have anything running longer than 2 hours. Kids just won't sit through it. So yeah, I really want to read the Hogfather now.
Well, that's good.
So that
was going to be my next question.
Yeah, so that I can compare it to the adaptation, because I think there's so much sort of ground level knowledge that I need to fill in.
Yeah. And, you know, if you're going to read Terry Pratchett, if you're going to read the Discworld, there are many, many websites out there that will delightedly tell you all the different orders you can read it in. My general recommendation for anyone trying to read Discworld is, say, find a character that you like and then read everything pertaining to that character.
I like that idea.
Because there are little mini-series within the series, or you could start with a standalone, like some of them, what's called like the Small Gods series is actually a series of completely standalone stories, starring characters that only appear once and then are maybe referenced in later books, but generally it's just, you know, one contained story.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's an undertaking, becoming a Discworld fan, but sadly, at least we know the stories are never going to get any longer.
Yes, that is sad. I feel like I should have made more of, you know, Terry Pratchett while he was in the world in terms of reading his stuff, and I even had the opportunity to meet him once at the Going Postal play that I went to see. He went and watched and gave it a big thumbs up, so that was, you know, that's always a good you know, mark when the author likes it. But yeah, no, it's sad, but I hope that if I become a Pratchett fan, he'll live on.
And it's not like he wasn't bloody prolific. You've got plenty to keep you going.
Absolutely. How many novels in the Discworld?
The latest one was called Shepherd's Crown.
Yeah.
That was actually only published just a couple of months ago.
Oh, really?
I want to say that's the 31st.
Wow. Okay.
I actually don't know that. I might have to look that up. I'll make another blurp noise and I'll fill it in with. Shepherd's Crown is the 41st Discworld novel.
Well, at my current rate of reading books, that will last me up until about 60 then.
But then there's also, I mean, obviously he didn't just write Discworld. He did write a lot of other things, like there's Strata and Dark Side of the Sun, and then there's the whole Digger's Wings trilogy.
And he co-authored stuff as well.
He co-authored a lot of stuff. Good Omens, very good. Co-authored with Neil Gaiman. And actually, I believe last year, the radio adaptation of Good Omens, starring, actually, very briefly, Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett, might have been his last appearance, I think, in that.
Cool. Oh, there's so much to delve into.
Oh yeah, you've got plenty to keep yourself busy. But yeah, I think that's all for today. Yeah. So, thank you, Ali, for joining me in the second chair.
My pleasure.
And we are at Big Punch Studios.
We are.
We are hoping we will be making more and more of these podcasts and videos, so be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel to keep updated on what comes out. And if you like what you hear, everything we do is supported by our Patreons at patreon.com/BigPunchStudios. Please do check it out. And cheery bye, everybody. Bye.